if you were to give like a little blip, like a little minute segment of why you could provide a lot of value in the job market and kind of running over your experience, what would be the little soundbite for you?
Well, I've had some kind of pretty interesting experience working around the globe in different roles. And I think I have some good insight onto how to get a job and how to stay employed, not only from my experience as interviewing, but also as a hiring person. I hire people and I can tell you right now what I will flush immediately and what will pique my interest.
Yeah. Yep. So I see that your first experience coming out of it was Berkeley, right? You went to college?
Actually, I did some I want to say executive education at Berkeley. I actually graduated from Concordia University in Montreal.
Oh, okay, cool. How was that experience?
That was great. Montreal is close to where I grew up. And so, Concordia is right in the middle of the city of Montreal. So it was very interesting to be in such a very metropolitan city, which is also very cosmopolitan and speaking French and so on. So it
Yeah.
was a good school.
Do you think that education was pretty foundational to what you had to do like directly after that experience?
To be honest, I would probably say it contributed. I was studying accounting and I quickly realized I did not want to be an accountant. By the time you get to the end of your education experience, when you're studying accounting, you start doing the real things that an accountant does. And it just did not really sit well with me. I couldn't imagine myself sitting there grinding numbers like that. So I ended up getting into very serendipitously into selling software that runs business, like general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and so on. So it was helpful, but it was definitely not where my career went.
Yeah. And so, I just want to get right into it. So, what brought you to Oracle? I see here that you started in Dubai. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started my career straight out of school in Dubai. It was kind of a crazy time. I was kind of desperate to get a job at that point. It was, the year I was looking for work, there was a bit of a recession and it was kind of hard to get a job. So I was able to land a job at Oracle as a temp. I was just a temp. The way it works in the Middle East is people take holiday for a whole month or 5 weeks. So I scored a job as a temp. I was the assistant to the managing director of the Middle East and Africa. And he saw when he saw my resume that, I had an education and so on, more than for the role I was doing. And so, I was there for my month, scrambling, trying to prove myself. And I did a good job. And then he kept me around for another couple months doing other, backfills. And I guess he saw that I was working hard, improving myself. He offered me a role being one of the first sales consultants in the Middle East. And, being a young female showing software in the Middle East was quite the ride.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. Um, I mean, do you have any good stories from back then that could be interesting to hear, or because I have a couple
I've
more
got
questions,
tons
but
of stories.
super interesting.
Yeah, I've got tons of stories. I mean, I used to have to travel with, there wasn't the internet was kind of early in those days, and B, especially in the Middle East, because they were behind the ball. So I had to travel with these huge servers and big monitors like you guys probably never saw, or maybe you see in the museum.
Mhm.
The big monitors, traveling around to different countries like that. So I was in Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, Egypt, Kenya, all over the place, selling ERP software to big companies. And, I was young and I'm fair, so I'm clearly not Middle Eastern. And I was quite young at the time. So there were its fair share of challenges, culturally, obviously. Some countries are more conservative. I was demoing to Qatar one time and they weren't allowed to talk to me. So I would be presenting, they would ask the question to the sales rep, and the sales rep would ask me, and then I would answer. So,
Yeah.
there were all kinds of quirky, little crazy things that went on when I was starting this career journey. It was definitely being thrown in the deep end.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. And then, I'm looking like throughout your resume or your LinkedIn, I'm seeing you moved around a good amount. And what's interesting is a lot of the people we talk to for their job search, they never talk about anything overseas. Like it's always within the city they're at, or like a very like, obvious city like a New York or Miami or LA. But
Yeah.
I feel like very rarely at the schools I've seen that people recruit or at least look outside of the country, even at London or places that seem more Western. I mean, what would you say to that? Do you think people should be looking more for experiences outside the country? Like, what could you speak to that?
My advice to you is if you get an opportunity to work overseas, don't even think about it. Say yes and pack your bags and go. If you can speak a different language, make sure you advertise that on LinkedIn. Um, I can tell you that I speak French because I was raised in Quebec, and I have gotten jobs over people with way more experience that were actually contractors in the company just because I spoke French and they had an office in France. I never used French the 2 years I was there, never used French, but I got the job because of that, you know. And overseas, that has been one of the most valuable little gold coins in my pocket. So I would advise if you have the opportunity to work overseas, study overseas, grab it, get out there, do it.
Yeah. It is crazy. I was looking at like Deloitte the other day and you see all the overseas offices they have in like every country you could
Oh
name.
yeah.
I remember when I was taking Chinese in high school, my parents wanted me to continue it because I would have such an advantage of getting a job in an office like that in a Mandarin speaking country. So just it's super interesting to see all the experiences and everything. But yeah, so what kind of brought you to the next experience of being a principal applications consultant in Oracle, or did you already cover that with the earlier?
No, well, when I was in the Middle East, after 2, 3 years of doing that, it ground. It became challenging, Um, when I would go into countries, I was always questioned about what my purpose was there. They didn't believe I was a software salesman. I don't know if they thought I was a saleswoman. I don't know if they thought I was coming in to do I don't know what, but whatever. It was very difficult, and it just grinded down on me. And I decided, okay, there was an opportunity. One time I came back from a trip from Jordan or Egypt or something, and I had hauled in all the software and all the hardware rather into the office, massive boxes and crates. And it was a late night on a weekend, and I was very defeated. And when I looked online, there was a job at headquarters for Oracle. So I applied. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had a call. They had called me. I interviewed on the spot, and within a few days, I had the role. So obviously, when I gave my notice in Dubai, they started to freak out because I had onboarded all these other people, but I was the leader of the team, the one with the most knowledge.
Mhm.
And they were fighting to keep me because it was going to impact their year-end numbers if I were to leave. They were just making some, dramatic excuses to keep me. But I
Mhm.
managed to get to escape and join Oracle headquarters in San Francisco, Redwood Shores, which was absolutely fantastic. And working in a small country like that on my own pretty much in the beginning, it's hard to learn the software. So you don't really have anyone to lean on, right? So I developed a network of asking some of the people in the office that did different jobs, and they would refer me to other people, and I would build bonds. It's really important to develop those relationships because by building these bonds and having conversations with people and joking around a little bit, they saw me more as a person than an annoyance and were really open to help me. I had really good relationship with the support people in London, even though I was in Dubai, and they would help me and teach me things, um, which helped me learn more, right? And when you're working on your own, like I was on my own in the Middle East, and eventually I had to cover everything, right? I had to cover all the different products. And when I went to headquarters, I realized that people typically only know 2 or 3 products. I knew like 20.
Mhm.
So I didn't realize my value. And as a result, I probably could have negotiated a better salary, but I didn't realize my value. And so when I moved to headquarters, I was put on the SWAT team, like SWAT team, like strategic weapons and tactics or
Mhm.
whatever. And we covered the biggest deals in North America. So say there was a deal with 3M in Minnesota. They already had a team on the ground, but they didn't have enough people or people with enough of a depth of knowledge. So I would get flown out there, be in charge of running the deal, managing the presentations and so on. And because I was on the SWAT team, I was like more prominent and more influential in not just the running of the deal, but in interactions with the customer. So I didn't know my worth. And when I got to headquarters and was like, hang on, you don't demo this and this, you only demo that? Oh, then I started to realize, oh crap, being on my own and working my ass off. I was working like 40, no, I'm not saying 40 hours. It was like probably like 60, 70 hours a week,
Yeah.
working hard, learning the software, digging around, doing research, trying to figure stuff out on my own and reaching out to people that I had built relationships with. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That answers a lot more than my question. Yeah, and that leads me to 70 other questions. There's a lot of information in there. So well, two things. One, I'm kind of interested, and not to jump the gun a little bit, but with traveling so much, do you think that, I mean, you've been at Oracle for a while, and I know you're at a different company now, but what do you think like the evolution of like the amount of traveling the employees would do then compared to now? Because I'm assuming now, especially post-COVID with Zoom and everything like that, do you think people in a similar position have to travel as much as you had to do back then, or it was the only means of doing it back then?
That was the only means of doing it back then. You had to be in front of the customer. There were no other options. I mean, you could have a web conference, right? Or what? No, I don't even think they called it a web conference. I think it was just like, a conference call. But
Mhm.
when you can't see people's faces and read them and see their body language, it's kind of hard to know how things are going. So we were always in face of the customer.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I feel like after COVID, okay, so obviously during COVID, everybody was on Zoom. There was no
Mhm.
option. There was a scramble. Some companies that we were dealing with didn't, their people didn't even have laptops to take home. There were like 5,000 employees at some company that I was working with. They all had desktops at the office, and all of a sudden they had to order 5,000 laptops, get them all configured. It was a complete mess. But that
Mhm.
aside, um, I feel like after COVID kind of calmed down, it went the other way to everybody wants in person. It's like in person, in person. Now it seems to have gone to a smart balance where anything that can be done on Zoom, within an hour or two, because people do lose attention, right? Then it's more than that, it's better to be face to face. And that's kind of what this company pushes. So,
Yeah.
for example, I was just in Paris working on a localization for French. It was a 1 day meeting, but we could have done it on Zoom, but it wouldn't have been anywhere near as productive because you need to have conversations, stand up, use a whiteboard. There's some debates that happen, you can't really do that effectively on Zoom. So, you fly to Paris for the day.
That's actually an interesting way to think. Yeah, and I mean, first of all, congrats. But second of all, I never really thought of it like that, where if you're gonna have a quick, 30-minute conversation, that could be done on Zoom or on a call or whatnot. But it makes sense to be flown out if it's gonna be a multi-day, series of meetings, everything like that. So it's pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then also what I thought was interesting that you touched on is like the aspect of like networking and making bonds with people and talking to people. And I feel like in the job search world, it's so obvious that you have to network and talk to hiring managers and do all that. But I feel like no one talks about the role of networking within the job. Like the people you meet and work with are such good connections for you and could lead so many doors. So, I mean, what would you think about that? Because I don't think even the people who I know have gotten great jobs and are 2 years, 3 years into their career, they never talk about networking or making connections and whatnot. So, what do you think about that?
Um, I think that they don't teach enough soft skills in college or in high school or anything. Soft skills are one of the biggest pluses you can have because I've heard people say this before. IQ will get you your first job. EQ will keep you employed. I don't know if you guys know or you know much about EQ. It's the
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, EI or emotional quotient.
Mhm.
So I've hired people that on paper they look great, they're super smart, they've graduated from a good school, they got great grades, I'm like, yeah, this kid's gonna rock it. And then they come in and they can't have interpersonal conversations. They don't know how to engage with other people on the team or outside of the team. They don't really have the nature or understanding of the value of interacting with other people and building those relationships. Now, building relationships within the job is, I think, one of the reasons that I've had a lot of success in my career. And when I say building relationships, don't just go to people when you need something. I do that sometimes, but I don't just go, hey, can you give me that report? Or, hey, can you reboot the server? No, you have to go in there and you have to build a relationship. You need to get people to want to do things for you. And if you're not nice, or if you're bossy or condescending or just not engaging, it's not going to help.
Mhm.
I always make sure that when I'm talking to people or meeting people, I find out a little bit about them. Where do you live? Oh yeah. How long have you been here? Where did you go to school? Have you tried this? Oh, you're in Minnesota. Oh, that's cool. How's the winter? Just ask questions, get interested. There's a really good book that I advise to people. It's called The Trusted Advisor. It's there's a new version, 25-year edition, and it really gets into how to get people to do things for you. And I'm not saying that like a mean person, like, oh, I just want to get rid of all my work. But, to be successful, you need to have a team. You need to work with other people, right? And the trusted advisor kind of talks about how you build trust with someone so that they want to work with you. And it's not just as an interpersonal, like within your team or outside of your team. I'm talking also about your customer, right? Because we're all going to have to work with somebody. Somebody's our customer, right? My customer is internal right now. It's internal, but I still need to make sure that I'm building the relationships and building that trust with those people.
Yeah.
And I don't have any commission or anything on that book. It's just something I've read in the last year that I think is really, really valuable.
Yeah, no, I love it. And a huge two words I wrote down on my paper is soft skills. And I think that, it's something that no one really talks about. I actually had a conversation with a university recruiter from Gartner, and she was saying how, nowadays everyone knows the importance of hard skills, learning Excel, learning how to negotiate, whatever, all these,
Yeah.
skills that could be taught or whatever. But what's difficult, especially with, I'm not gonna, poop on my generation, but especially with the younger the kids are, they're struggling with the soft skills, right? So the people skills, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for it, but that's a conversation for another day. But at the end of the day, like the soft skills is actually the one that's lacking, because from all these great schools, you can find so many people who are so gifted in all the realms of like hard skills and whatnot. But at the same time, amongst those people, it's getting harder and harder to find people who can communicate and talk to other people, which is the soft skills, the quote unquote less important ones, but are becoming more and more relevant. So we were talking about strategies with the university group from Gartner about some people should try working jobs as like even a waiter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those jobs, which aren't really glorified, teach you so many things about customer service, speaking with other people. And so what do you think are some good strategies for students who kind of either know they're lacking or want to develop their soft skills to really do that?
Yeah. Well, I like that we're talking about soft skills, because one thing that a lot of leadership people say is, like
Mhm.
we're talking about, Excel. I can teach someone Excel. It's hard to teach someone how to engage with other people. So
Yeah.
you know what? I hadn't thought of working at a restaurant, but working in customer service at a job where you have a more intense stress, you got to think on your feet, and that you have to interact with people who are potentially not so happy, you know.
Yeah.
These skills, working in that kind of an environment, those skills are transferable. So you should never look badly upon doing something like that, because those skills will teach you, and they'll be transferable to when you get a professional career.
Mhm.
You'll already have the built-in like knowledge. I'm trying to think of the word, but the skills built in to be able to handle these things. One of my kids was working at Walgreens while she was going to school, and she learned prioritization, time management, interaction, organizing. And you know what? She could work in a McKinsey doing management consulting.
Mhm.
She learned all these skills while doing school. And not just that, obviously dealing with your peers, dealing with customers, sometimes happy, not happy, because you can get flustered.
Mhm.
If you talk into a customer that is not happy, it can get you flustered. But I think if you have a little bit of experience in that, it's very helpful. Soft skills, you've got to take it. You've got to learn it. You know, if that means, you know, you're not comfortable in public speaking, go and do a Toastmasters class.
Mhm.
Uh, Go and take a presentation class. Get used to getting uncomfortable, because that's how you learn, right? They say, don't stay in your comfort zone. Try and push yourself out there, because that's how you learn. That's how you get better at things. As much as it might be intimidating, you just got to push through.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% right. I think it's easier to teach someone the skill of Excel rather than trying to undo, 20 years of bad learning with social skills. Like that's it's ingrained in you from a young age, so it's harder to teach. But yeah, you're spot on with that. So I wanted to go to your time with correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but Rudders, and
Reuters.
Readers. Okay, sorry. As a freelance applications consultant, you were there for like two years and 5 months. So kind of just run me
Yeah.
through what you did for them in London, and tell me more about the company.
So Reuters is a very big company. They're a news agency. You know, if you look at any news article, maybe it's on sports or finance, you'll sometimes see Reuters at the bottom. So
Mhm,
they're a very big company that kind of pushes out news.
mhm,
Um, they had these terminals that they would have in big companies, you know, like McKinsey or a Price Waterhouse. They have these big machines that would have all the news coming out. And so the project I worked on was in a warehouse. It was a pretty rough area of London, and it was a lot of fun. Um, the reason I was freelancing was it was a time where I had been working at Oracle on the SWAT team, and a lot of my friends decided, okay, they want to travel and live abroad and everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to jump on that train, because once you get responsibilities like a house, children, a husband, a wife, a partner, whatever it might be, a dog, you know, it's harder to do these things. So I really encourage people to do that. But what I did at not Getty, sorry, Reuters, was I implemented a procurement system and inventory for them with 18 other people. I was the only woman. It's high tech for you. And I was actually also the person who worked with the other teams. There were 3 implementations going on: the
mhm,
warehousing, finance, and human resources. And all of these applications touch each other, right? Purchasing needs to pick up people from HR
mhm.
to put as buyers. I need to send payables information from the purchase order into the finance people. So anyways, I was able to be the person kind of at the middle working on the integrations. Again, soft skills, right? I don't think I would have been chosen if I was like a wallflower in the corner having trouble articulating anything.
Yeah,
So, you know, I didn't know everything, right? You don't know. Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. You push yourself outside of your comfort zone and off you go. So that was a pretty wild ride, the implementing in Europe for 2 years. So
yeah,
it was a good experience for sure.
yeah.
Being your
I
own
honestly,
boss too.
sorry, what?
Being your own boss as a freelance too. You don't have any net to fall on. You know, you don't have your own insurance. You have to think about all these things. If anybody goes to freelance or be a contractor, you got to keep in mind that, yeah, you know, $100 an hour might sound good, but don't forget you got to pay the tax man. You've got to make sure that you think about your health insurance that you're going to have to pay for yourself and so on. So
Mhm.
working as an independent is different. There's some benefits. You can charge more. You can claim all kinds of stuff on your taxes. But you know, you need to think of these things if ever you go to do freelance. It's not for the light of heart.
Yeah, and I will
Faint of
admit,
heart, faint of heart.
yeah, I will admit, I did not realize how much you traveled around for your career. This is super interesting. So from all the countries in the Middle East to London, and then obviously to places around America, it's super interesting. So, and I'm sure that definitely that whole process picked you up, a billion skills along the way and a billion
Yeah.
experiences. So yeah, and so moving along to CSC, I kind of want to know what was that about? It was in the Seattle area, Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was the company, based out of? And yeah, I just want to hear more about it. I know it's an Oracle company, right?
Yeah, it was a company that did Oracle implementations.
Hmm.
So I left London. I had met some people that were from Portland when I was in London through the networking again. Um, the any software, or I'm sure any business that some of the finance or whatnot, it kind of gets incestuous. You get to know all the different people. Oh, you know so and so. Oh, we're having drinks and dinner here, and
Hmm.
then you meet other people. So try and go to all those things, because you never know who you're going to meet and how that might help in the future. The same with the internal people, right? You don't know where they're going to be in 3 years. They could help you in the future. So um, okay, sorry, I got off track there for a sec. What was
Yeah, I was just wanted to touch on the company, the Oracle
okay,
consulting
so
company.
yeah. So basically, while I was living in London, I met some people who were doing a startup implementation company in the Pacific Northwest for Oracle implementations. And I said, why not? I got a piece of the company, moved to Oregon. So I went from living across from Harrods in London to flying into this tiny podunk town called Wenatchee in the middle of Washington, where the plane door opened like this and you step down the stairs. And I swear to God, there was a tumbleweed that rolled right in front of me. And I'm like, what the bleep? I was in London at Harrods and now I've got tumbleweeds. What the heck?
Yeah.
But you know what? Out of my comfort zone. And it gave me an opportunity to grow, right? This role gave me an opportunity to have a leadership and work in an industry I wasn't familiar with. So from that, after we did that implementation with this company, it was actually called ECS. I won't get into the details of what the acronym means,
Hmm.
but we were about 100 people within this startup company. And we were crushing it against Oracle, winning all the implementation bids to put their software into big companies like AT&T Wireless, Paxos, which you may not have heard of, but they're one of the biggest suppliers of white leather and paper to Nike.
Hmm.
So some big companies. And so we were a fairly small company, but very high quality people, like real hard workers, people who, people who can get shit done.
Hmm.
So that was really interesting. And then we got acquired because we were so good. A company called Computer Sciences Corporation, which was much bigger in the day, but I think it still exists, but probably not so big anymore. We got acquired, and being acquired is kind of interesting because you cash out, right? We're not going to lie. We like the money. But then you're going from this small, intimate, 100-person, extremely nimble company. All of a sudden, now you're in a company that's got process and rules and, boundaries and so on. You're not like the Wild West anymore. So that was kind of a shocker. And a lot of people left. I stayed around for about 6 months and then I pulled the plug. I wasn't happy anymore. Um, but it was a lot of fun. It was
Yeah.
definitely a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I want to ask about? This is interesting. So I haven't asked this in any of the podcasts, but being in a company that gets acquired, changes management and whatnot, like what is that experience like? Because the more resumes I look at, the more people I talk to, that's a real scenario that happens to a lot of people where they're in this company, they really enjoy it. And let's just say, as you were in like it's 100-person company or even like 1,000-person company, then they get bought and the entire culture changes, all the rules start changing. So what was the
Yeah.
experience with that? And then what, general pieces of like knowledge and advice and wisdom you had from that experience?
So it's kind of interesting because we were acquired back in 99 or whatever it was, by CSC. Then later on, I worked at Oracle, and I don't know if you guys know, but you should look it up if you don't. It was one of the biggest hostile takeovers in software. I think it was 2004, 2005. Oracle did a hostile takeover of PeopleSoft, who also owned a bunch of other companies. That was insane. So we've been on both sides of the coin. And where I work now, we were a public company and we got acquired by a private equity company. So let me start first with being a small startup freelance, not freelance, sorry, a small startup, 100 people, super nimble, really aggressive, going in there. And I mean, I was at AT&T and I managed to get 10 consultants from Oracle kicked out and brought in my 10 people. So
Wow.
that was a big win for me and it got me a promotion. But anyhow, that aside, it does change the culture because one of the big things, like, especially if you're in a small startup kind of company, it does get to be a bit like the Wild West. So there's pros, right? You have the nimbleness, you have the flexibility, the freedom. There's not many rules on purse strings all the time. Spending is pretty free. There's not many rules and regulations. It's just like get the business, grow, get the business, grow. So when you get acquired, all of a sudden they're like, okay, now you used to be a kid running around in your diaper doing whatever you wanted. Now it's time to put your big boy shoes on.
Mhm.
So, there's process that you have to start to adhere to. Some companies only buy you for your logos. They want your customers, right? They want that revenue. So my advice is look at the culture of the leadership in the company that is acquiring you. You can do research now really easily. You can see what the culture is. If the culture is like grind down the company, strip it, and just basically absorb it, and not really a good vibe, but you've got to really be aware of that. I suggest like hang on for as like if you need to get your bonus or whatnot, hang on to get your bonus, if that means 6 months or whatever. And then it gives you a chance to check out what's going on. And if it's not good, you got your cash, move on.
Mhm.
Being in a company that acquired another company in a hostile takeover kind of a situation, I saw all of the other employees from PeopleSoft coming into Oracle extremely, extremely angry, right? They were working in PeopleSoft had a beautiful culture. It was all happy dappy, family parties and all kinds of stuff. It's Workday now, basically. It's the same founder. And Oracle is much more, I don't know, kind of like IBM, I guess, much more rigid and so on. So that there was a lot of tension there. And now we've just got acquired. The company I'm working for, we were acquired about a year ago by a private equity company. And the culture, see, these people are smart. The company I'm working at, Coupa, has a fantastic culture, just the most amazing culture. It's a bit bigger than 100 people. It's 3,000, and we were publicly traded.
Mhm.
And we got bought by this company because they saw that our product was killer. We were market leaders, and there was a room for improvement because even though we were 3,000 people, we were still running like a startup, not so much process, not so many boundaries, purse strings wide open. So they acquired us because they knew that if they tightened the belt a little bit, they could make a huge profit.
Yeah.
But they are absolutely, one of the biggest focuses for them is to keep the culture, because they know if you keep the culture, you keep the people, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. I know it's kind of the long road to get to
Mhm.
probably what the answer you wanted, but one of the most important things I feel about, if in hindsight of all the jobs I've had, it's who you work for. It's what the vibe is at work, right? I mean, how much does it suck if you're in a fear-based environment where they're like, get this done or else, where otherwise, or if you're in a place that's supportive, you want to work harder when you're in a place that they show that they care, right?
Yeah.
So culture is really important. I think that's something people overlook a lot too.
We spent, just so you know, the last episode I filmed, the gentleman worked at Accenture for 10 years, and then he worked at a smaller startup and kind of a similar story in a lot of regards. But we spent literally half the episode talking about company culture and how it's like so overlooked. And I can just speak from my expertise of being like a college student. People want to know, how much money you're getting paid at a job and where is it, and maybe a couple other things. But it's never like, what is the culture like of the job they're looking at. And, maybe you don't have to consider it until you get there, but once you get there, it is the only thing that matters because that's the day to day. So I think it's just extremely overlooked. And I
Yeah.
think, and you can definitely speak to this more than I can, but the culture of a company is everything. Like I give the example of when I went to Fisher Investments versus Oppenheimer. One company was like 1,000 people felt like on one floor, and it was kind of like do it yourself and a different model. And Oppenheimer was like 25 people total in the office. And so very intimate, very one-on-one approach. And so it's just different. It's whatever you're into, but that's why being on like knowing the culture is so important for each company. So
Yeah, it really does. Because you spend all your day there, right? This is where you spend most of your time.
mhm.
And if you're working with people you like, you're more happy when you have to get up in the morning. If you're working at a job that's got a negative vibe, or that your boss is micromanaging you, or it's too much pressure, you're not going to have the same job satisfaction. You know, you're going to be paying more for a therapist.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's another interesting thing I want to ask about is a hostile takeover. So this is maybe out of my personal curiosity, but what exactly is that? I think it's kind of like a buzz term that I've heard like thrown around, but what does it actually look like for a company? And also like speaking to the thing that you saw when you were at the company when it happened.
So Oracle is led, or it still is led, but not as much, but by a gentleman called Larry Ellison. He's very famous. He invented the relational database. He's a very visionary. So I don't know exactly how he did it, but basically he just started, I don't think it was him. He had probably some corporation or something, but buying all the stock.
Hmm.
PeopleSoft was publicly traded, buying, to the point where he had the majority, right? He had more say than anybody else. So that's a hostile takeover. They did not want to get acquired, but they had no choice because Oracle held all the stock or most of the stock or enough stock to be able to pull the plug on that.
Hmm.
So hostile takeover means that pretty much everybody is like, bleep, bleep, bleep. Are you kidding me? And talking about culture, PeopleSoft had a fantastic culture. You know, they would have family parties on the weekends, and after work, they would have barbecues. And, you know, that stuff was not done back in the 90s,
Yeah.
right? The early 2000s. That wasn't a thing. Um, so it had a really great culture. And coming to Oracle, where it was more of a get to work, here's your deadline. It's, you know, 150,000 people when I left. It was
Yeah.
probably about, I don't know, 40, 50,000 people, but that's a massive amount of people,
Hmm.
right? It's hard to have, um, first of all, it's hard to get noticed, right? Second of all, it's hard to see if you're making an impact and you're kind of just a number.
Yeah. Do you think,
So
yeah. Sorry, we're gonna say?
no, I was just going to say, so I mean, I can still remember seeing the people coming into the office from PeopleSoft, and you could just see the anger on their face. And what does that mean? Not productive. They're going to be talking and gossiping and complaining. They're not going to be eager to do their jobs. And you got to try and work with them and welcome them, right? And you know they don't want to be there. So it makes it hard for you, and you feel a little guilty. You're a
Yeah.
human, right? You're like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Now you're here. I'd like to take care of you, but try not to be too mad at me. It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
It's really a tough situation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I hear about these, startups. I know you had like 100 plus employees, but these early stage companies who seem to always have like great culture. And then there's that dynamic, and there's always the culture of the huge company like Oracle. Obviously, you said there's 50,000 people at the time. Um,
Yeah, and now it's 100 and it's got to be over 150 now.
yeah. And do you think it's harder for these big companies to have a strong culture, a strong foundation of that? Or do you think every company does it different? Or do you think it's just a problem of a bigger company as you scale, it's just harder to keep that like tight knit family sort of culture? Or, what have
Well,
you seen in working in those two environments?
okay, that's a good question. So I personally think that culture can come from the top. So if your CEO, CFO, whatever, your executive level people don't have the desire to have a really positive experience, like that's not their primary focus, it's not going to be the greatest, right? You can potentially, though, like for example, say you're in a company, a big company, and the leadership at the top really doesn't care about, are you happy when you come into work? Did you get a free coffee? You know, they don't care, right? It's more like, did you do your job? Did you leave the lights on in the office and spend money on the electricity? I mean, you know, it can get really
Yeah.
crazy. Um, but you can get lucky because sometimes within organizations like that, you'll have a pocket. Maybe there'll be a vice president and they have a great culture and a desire to have a team that's productive and happy. So you can have a pocket that's got a great culture, even in a company that doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, it really is a lot about the leadership's point of view.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And then, even at Fisher Investments, I think there's a couple big offices, and I was at the one in Plano, Texas. And so, but I would hear that the Tampa office is extremely different. So even just hearing like the
yeah,
employees talk to each other, I was only an intern at the time, but hearing the higher ups like talk to each other and hearing them on the phone and everything, it's crazy to see how like in the same company, under obviously different leaderships, different buildings and stuff, there could be such a different culture. So something
yeah,
interesting. But
it
I
is
want to get to
interesting.
I want to get to the other time with Oracle and Getty and everything like, and also celebrate women. I don't want to
Yeah.
lose track of time and everything. So yeah, tell me about your time building, celebrate women, everything like that. I saw that it unfortunately was shut down due to like 9/11 as a travel company, but
Yeah.
quickly run me through that experience. I'd love to know more about it.
So after I left CSC, right, and I told you we got some money. I'm very transparent. So we got some money, right? We got acquired. Everybody was happy dappy, but I didn't like the culture. So I went over to this other company and I worked for them on a special project with the executive leadership for about 6 months. And I had this money and I was really thinking, I'd like to have my own company. I love to travel. I love doing activities. And I know that as a female, traveling alone can sometimes be daunting, and your friends can't always go with you and they don't always want to do the same things as you do. So I'm like, okay, what if I set up a company that was women's travel, but active travel and also, some little, kind of maybe soft skillish type things where
Yeah.
you do reflection and meditation and journaling and yoga and all kinds of stuff like that. But given that I feel the water is very, very healing, all of the different locations that I was going to have these trips to were near the water, Santa Barbara, New Zealand, Catalina, and so on. So, there would be, activities on the water, activities on land, and, all those things. So I actually got some angel investors, again, through connections, through people I knew, getting introduced to one person and then another. And, if you can articulate what your vision is and always talk about the value. Okay, we'll get back to the value. I want to talk about value. Okay. So everything was ready to roll. Our launch date was November 4th, 2001. And we were getting close. We had everything all lined up. We were going to have this huge launch right down on 4th Street or 3rd Street. I can't remember which one in Santa Monica. Was going to be really, really fun. And then bang, 9/11 happens. Nobody wants to get on a plane. Nobody wants to get on a plane. Nobody wants to travel. The world is shaken. Everybody's shaken to the core. And so unfortunately, it wasn't going to go anywhere. So
Yeah.
I had to close it down and then go back to finding a real job where I ended up at Getty Images.
Yeah. And it's terrible, but yeah, I'm sure you learned a lot through the process and everything like that. And getting on to Getty Images, I obviously see their stuff everywhere, like on all over the internet. So it's cool to hear someone that worked there. But tell me about your time there for the 2+ years and kind of what you did for them and some good experiences you had from there.
Yeah, it was actually kind of cool. I was brought in again. So I guess you kind of figured out my area is software, right? I've been
Yeah.
selling it, I've been implementing it, and so on. So with this role that I had here, this is actually one that I got for the French, right?
Mhm.
So I spoke French and they had an office in France, office in New York, office in Seattle, and I think it was Hong Kong. And they
Mhm.
were doing a global um, implementation of business software, basically your accounts payable, inventory management, receivables, yada, 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 right? So I got that job and my competition for that role was a woman who had been working there 2 years as a contractor.
Mhm.
And because I spoke French, I got that job. And which, by the way, I never used the French.
As I
So
mentioned, yeah.
yeah, but anyway, so we did the implementation globally. It was a lot of fun. I had great people working with me. And again, I got that job also because I knew somebody. That was another plus. I knew somebody who was on the technical side leading the tech team, and I was leading more of the business side, the functional people. So he actually put in a good word for me and helped me get that job as well. So I hate to say it. I know it's, you know, if it's not who you know, you better show up and perform on your interview.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to
Yeah.
be ready. You got to be ready to go. You got to have good questions, and you got to make sure that you talk about your value. What do you bring to the table, right? So whatever you're selling, whether it be yourself, whether it be software that you're trying to sell to a customer, whether you're trying to get someone on another team to help you, think about why do they care? So I always say, so what? So what? Why do I care? Right? Why do you care? So you've got to go in, you've got to say, hey, look, not only have I got a degree from this great school, but I have these transferable skills where I was working at this burger joint and I was working under high pressure. I had to deal with upset customers. Whatever it might be, you've got to come in and show your value, try and do research on the company, know what's important to them, ask questions, right? You make people feel important by asking questions about them and what they do.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that was getting images and a little extra.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's already been like 50 minutes, so I'm not trying to rush this
No,
conversation.
no, no, I know.
Just want to make sure I get to everything. And you have so much good experience. I know we could stop and each of these bullets like talk for 2 hours. So
Yeah, maybe we talk about what I don't know if this is okay with you, but maybe what I would look for in hiring, because I see hundreds of resumes.
I was getting to that, but we could skip to it, honestly.
Okay,
So
what else did you want to
no,
cover?
I just wanted to hear your experiences, and then usually the people I talk to haven't had as much experience as you, so usually we run through the resume and everything like that, and then obviously then talk like top down stuff. But I'd love to talk about all the resumes you've seen and everything like that, and some of the good advices you have for everything. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, what are some trends you've seen in resumes between your experience and what you see now, and just some good advice that you could have for the audience.
Yeah, so, right these days, when a job is posted, people apply. There's machines that go through with algorithms and plop out some resumes, right? So my advice is to go and look at some of the tools that will help you match the job to your resume or your resume to the job. But that we won't get into that. What I'd like to get into is once the resumes get on my desktop or on my desk, come across my desk, what do I do? Well, I look to see, all right, do people have, again, transferable skills, something there that looks like it would fit well with the team? I try and look a bit more outside the box than just ticking, okay, he knows Microsoft Excel. They know how, so to get to the interview, I'll always look and see, okay, do they have approximately what I'm looking for? If it's written in a manner where, again, they talk about the accomplishments, if they can have numbers on there, those are things I'm going to look into. If there's success stories about what they've accomplished, that's always interesting too. So once I get face to face with somebody and have an interview, it really is about the soft skills. If someone just sits there and kind of is nervous and fidgety and doesn't have the ability to communicate, or I'm pulling information out of them, that's always a little tricky. It's not really a very good thing, right? You want somebody who's engaging, makes eye contact, even if you're on Zoom, right? You kind of like, you're looking at me now. I know you're not looking at the camera in the eyes, but I know you're looking at me, right? But are they looking over here? Are they doing this? Are they nervous? Are they shifty? Are they avoiding answering questions? And then most importantly, don't bullshit a bullshitter. You know, we know when you're bullshitting. So try and be as honest and transparent as you can without bullshitting, because some people bullshit and it just is so off-putting, right? So anyhow, do you have a question? Go for it.
I was going to ask, like, what are, just out of my own curiosity, I don't know if you're allowed to share this, but what are like some common things that people like lie about and like fib about on their resume and everything like that? Because I know I can imagine how you could write like a fake experience you didn't have, or a fake even bullet point, or a measurable that's not correct. But do you see people come through that lie about entire job experiences that haven't
Yep.
been had?
I've had that one time where somebody lied 100% on their resume. Nothing was true. And again, this was pre, LinkedIn, where you could verify things, right?
Mhm.
Check the friggin' references. Don't trust. So one guy came in and he had lied about everything on his resume, didn't know, right? But it comes obvious when you're trying to get them to do stuff, like say they knew Excel, but then they can't even add up a column, you
Yeah,
know? And you can see if they ask for help once, maybe they're a little rusty, if they're asking, and you can observe their peers, right? If you see them having to help or pitch in, or, you can also ask their peers, hey, how is John doing in the role? And they can say, well, doesn't really, doesn't really know how to do this or does. So that's one thing that I've had fibbed about, but that one was a big one where he lied about the whole resume. And, sometimes people will stretch the truth
mhm,
on their resume and say that they were in charge of a project where they might have just been a contributor.
yeah,
So That's the kind of things you don't, somebody will catch you on it. There's no point in lying because it's just you're gonna, people talk. It's don't put yourself in that situation. It's not smart.
Mhm.
Yes, you can, I don't want to say exaggerate, but point out the highlights, so you didn't run the project, but the piece you did, highlight the good things that you did in that project. What were the highlights? What did people notice? What did you accomplish? What was the impact? What was the so what?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, super cool. And then I also wanted to ask you, as someone who recruits, what do you think about LinkedIn nowadays? Because I'm starting to see that recruiters are looking at it almost as important, or if not more important, than the actual resume in terms of like hiring documentation. So, what do you think about like the rise of LinkedIn, everything like that? I know it's been around for I think like 20 plus years, but I
Yeah,
think,
I know it's been around. It's great. I love LinkedIn.
yeah,
It does annoy me a bit that it's become a bit more social media because I
yeah,
don't think, but that's a whole nother topic. But
yeah,
I love LinkedIn because one of the cool things with LinkedIn is you're able to actually see connections, right? So when you go to LinkedIn, you can look at a job or a company or a person, and it'll tell you any connections that you have. Leverage those connections. If you went to the same school as a person, but you never met them, reach out to them
hmm,
because it's, again, who you know. And if you can get someone to put a good word in for you in any way, shape, or form, it always helps. It's not mandatory. You can get a job without that easily, not easily, but you can. It's not like a mandatory, but it certainly puts the chances on your side. So
yeah,
LinkedIn, yes. And yeah, you know what? Sometimes resumes will come across my screen and I'll be like, okay, I don't really want to look at all this blah blah on the resume. I'm just going to click on the LinkedIn link.
yeah.
I don't know. Resumes might be a thing of the past in a few years, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess something that you kind of touched on. So LinkedIn being kind of like a social media thing nowadays, and I have seen this transformation even in like the 3, 4 years that I've been on it. I
Yeah,
see people posting on it as if it's Instagram, as if it's another social media platform.
yeah.
Question for you that'd be interesting. If you go on to, let's say you like a candidate and you go on to their LinkedIn and they post a lot of interesting stuff, like do you think being active on like social media and having like these personal brands or whatever and posting all this stuff, do you look at that negatively? I know growing up, everyone's like, don't post anything weird on Instagram because they'll find out and
There forever. Yeah, definitely don't post anything bad.
yeah,
I really, to be honest, as much as I hate to say it, if I see activity on LinkedIn and the posts are meaningful, um, I do like it. I
yeah,
do like it because it shows me that they're putting in an effort, right? And they're involved, they're engaged. So yeah, I do like it as much as I hate to say it because I do like it though.
yeah,
And you can look at the post. Obviously, if you're posting on LinkedIn, be careful.
yeah.
Double check if you're reposting, make sure it's not some BS.
Mhm,
Obviously, I'm going to say it, but this should be obvious. Stay the hell away from politics,
mhm,
and so on. Politics, religion, and there's what I don't know what else that's sensitive, but be really careful with that stuff because you can trigger somebody really easily.
mhm.
Try and keep it neutral. But if you're posting on meaningful comment topics, if you come across an article that's interesting and piques, you think is meaningful, definitely post it, repost it, and absolutely, that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also in terms of, we went over resumes, LinkedIn for interview prep and everything like that. Would you say like one of the most important skills, like based on what we've talked about, I can gather is just like to be calm and confident, kind of the more obvious things, but also the hardest things to do, like to practice. Do you think, what are some good strategies for like interview prep, and talking to either like hiring managers when you're trying to network? Like, what are some good tips for that?
Okay, good question. All right, so if you're going to go in for an interview, research the company, read their website, not just a little bit, try and understand what they do, who they are, look on the internet, do search on them, go to Glassdoor. They have ratings, and then they have people that'll say what the good or the bad things are. And you can call people on it when you're in an interview. You can say, hey, I was on Glassdoor and they said, that you guys don't get good time off. Talk to me about that. Leave open questions, let them explain it.
Hmm.
And it shows that you're interested and you're invested. But definitely, if you have any connections or know anybody who knows somebody who works there or works in a similar industry or competitor, talk to them, find out as much as you can. The more you know when you walk in the door, you're coming in armed. It shows that you've done your research. It shows that you give a shit. It shows that you're invested.
Yeah.
You know, when I see that, I'm like, okay, this person is a genuinely interested in the company. They're not, this isn't just like interview 30 of the week,
Yeah.
Um, so definitely do your research. I can't emphasize that more. Now, no matter how hard you try, coming into an interview not nervous and confident, not many people can do that. It's
Mhm.
always nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah.
Um, the best advice I think I have for that is just be yourself, you know, be yourself, be interested. And if you do feel some anxiety or something, try and just take some breaths, deep breaths. And that can usually help a little bit, get yourself grounded before you go in. But you also have to tell yourself if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to tell them why I matter, why I am a good choice. I'm going to I'm going to be interested in the company. I'm going to also learn about your people you're going to work with. Who's interviewing you? Look them up on LinkedIn. Look them. You know what? I even sometimes go and Google them. And if they have a Facebook page, I'll go look on the Facebook page. You know what? What did they do last weekend? Oh, they were up in Tahoe. Guess what? You don't have to say, I was looking on Facebook and I saw you were on a Tahoe. You can say, hey, I see that you live in San Francisco. Do you ever go skiing? Open it
Yeah.
up. And then dude, you get a bond there. All right. When you can find something to build a bond with, that makes a huge difference. You're going to be memorable. All right. Find some commonality, find something to talk about.
Yeah. And also, just to touch on something briefly, you said like interview 30, all these interviews people go through. I see different strategies for applying to jobs. And some people I know don't do any research, don't do any work, make one general resume, apply to like 300 jobs. There's some people I know who try super hard on maybe a set 20, maybe a 15 applications. Like, what would you say is like the perfect medium? Because there's probably not one right answer, but what do you think is the range of amount of companies and jobs people should be looking to apply to? And also, like, what have you seen as like a trend? Because I remember I was talking with the university recruiter from Gardner, and she said she's seen people apply because it's a big company, seen one person apply to 7 jobs at that same
Yep.
company from completely different roles.
Yep. And you know what? Just so you know, when we are the hiring managers, we have systems that we go through, right?
Mhm.
And when we look at the candidate, it tells you all the other jobs they've applied for. So when you're looking at that as a hiring manager, you're like, okay, this person's just doing a blast. They don't care.
Yeah.
They're looking at a support job, a sales job, a development job. It's like this guy just wants to get in the company, right? So that to me, when I see that, I don't like to see that. It to me means that they're not really interested in this role. So
Mhm.
my advice would be, yeah, apply for a ton of jobs, but don't apply for multiple at the same company unless it's the same role in different departments. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. Yeah,
Yeah,
apply for a
especially
ton of jobs. Definitely.
yeah, and especially when it's like different roles. Like I remember the anecdote last time was a software engineer, a salesman, someone who's a financial analyst, and obviously you could tell that individual is not really trying to specialize, just blasting it out there. So
Well, there's no harm in that if you're doing it at different companies, right? So maybe you apply at one company for a financial analyst, you apply for another one, you're a sales executive or a sales manager.
Mhm.
That's okay because guess what? As I was talking about skills, you might have the skills to do those jobs and you want to try and see what hits, what sticks, right? But when you're doing it at one company, keep it to one role or similar roles,
Yeah,
maybe working with sales with alliances and sales, those two jobs. Those are both in the same area, but don't apply to any old job and just click, 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 click. But
yeah.
I do say that if you want, apply for different types of jobs at different companies. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, another huge thing I want to touch on is the idea that people are starting to apply earlier and younger, and these huge companies, like especially like Oracle, I could assume, is having programs for, maybe internships, maybe people who are juniors, sophomores in college. And, do you think that these companies are starting to look and recruit younger? Like I hear that, 2025 summer internships for investment banking, like people are already getting offers now for something that's happening in a year and a half. And they're only gonna recruit earlier and earlier. So do you think this is a trend that's going to continue and they're going to start recruiting younger? What resources do you think are out there? Like, what do you think about this?
You know, in the industry I'm in, I don't see that we're recruiting earlier. I see that we might give an internship to a junior, somebody who just was a junior. We give them an internship.
Mhm.
That's probably the earliest that we would give somebody an internship in the industry I'm in, that
Yeah.
I've seen, maybe other companies, but in the companies I've worked at and the companies that I, have my peers at, I don't see it being earlier than juniors. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. And so if
And
you are like a sophomore in college, a freshman, even maybe you're in high school, senior, what do you think are some good ways? Obviously, we talked about like soft skills, like maybe getting a job as a waiter, like Walgreens, you talked about. What are some like basic top-down strategies you think to get ahead? Obviously, you can't apply for a job, but there's probably things you could do that could still build your resume, still build your skills to really get
yeah,
ahead. So what do you think are some good
so
strategies?
okay, so definitely get a job and don't think that being a waiter or coffee barista or working at Walgreens is beneath you, because you got to start somewhere, and you're going to get skills there that your peers aren't going to get.
Mhm.
You're going to stand out because you're working and you're learning things, right? So don't be shy, get in there early. As soon as you can get a job, get a job. That would be my advice, because you're going to learn so much,
Yeah.
so much. It'll put you ahead of the game. So that's one. Um, I would also encourage people to, if you can volunteer abroad, you
Mhm.
know, if you have the means or the ability to volunteer abroad, I encourage people to travel and see what's going on in the rest of the world, because I think it's very eye-opening,
Yeah.
and it'll open your mind to different things. And again, transferable skills, right? If I have meetings with people all over the world every day,
Mhm.
there's all different cultures, right? If I'm talking to somebody in Germany, they're not as fun.
Yeah.
They're much more, I shouldn't say that because I got Frank the Tank, who's awesome. But there, there's different cultures and the way they interact. And it's really important to know that, and it'll help you be successful. So I would say volunteer, travel, do both of those things, get a job.
Mhm.
And, if there's any opportunities, as uncomfortable and painful as it might be, to work on skills that you think you need to get better at, like presenting, join a Toastmasters, It's probably not going to be your most favorite thing. It's going to be out of your comfort zone, but push yourself, because you
Mhm.
know what? It's going to make a difference.
Yeah. I'm starting to understand now why you chose the world as your background. This makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I've learned so much, and I would just, if you were to boil this down to maybe a minute or one last piece of advice you want to leave to the audience for people who are trying to get jobs and internships, I mean, what would be some other good piece of advice we might have left down the conversation that you would think would be good?
Well, I definitely think it's important to be yourself and have confidence in what you bring to the table. Try
Mhm.
and think about your value, right? What is your value? What do you bring to the table? What skills do you have? Okay, I have a degree. What else you got? Right? I can walk in with my degree, and so what, right? Why do we care? Why
Yeah.
you? So understand your value and have confidence. I know it's hard, especially when you're coming out of school and you're probably thinking, oh God, all these other people have so much knowledge. What do I have? You got a lot, you just don't realize, right? And having a well-rounded experience, like I was saying, travel, get a job, these things will make a huge difference.
Mhm.
And just really be yourself, be sincere, and be interested, be curious, ask people about themselves, ask people about the job, ask why, and try, and if you can, try and think about asking open questions, not questions where people will just say yes or no. Say, tell me more about, the role. Tell me more about the people I'll be working with. Ask questions, because when you ask questions and that have people talking, you learn, they feel good about themselves, and they feel like you're genuinely interested. That's pretty much, I think, in a nutshell.
And I think that's great advice to leave it on. So again, I really appreciate for coming on this Wednesday, and I think I've learned so much. So I know everyone else will too, and I really appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.